the very last day of January in the year 2019. We just started this year, so it seems. But we're on the last of the first month of the year. But for that day is actually Thursday, when we bring to you Mek We Chat. And all of the usual suspects are in the house this evening. George Vance at the controls, Catherine in cold London, Margaret in cold in New York. Sometimes I don't know where Beverley is, but she will tell us.
That's all right, she did.
I am in my clothes, and I am in my clothes, so we're all here. Folks, we want to thank you very much for joining us, as usual. I think we've had a lot happening over the last week since we met. A tremendous amount has happened. And here we are once again to try and put some perspective on it. You don't have to agree with us, but you certainly can participate and share your own viewpoint of what has happened. To take us through this is our producer as usual, Beverley Sinclair. Welcome.
Good evening, folks. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I just love Thursdays 8 to 10. It's my favorite 2 hours for the week. How you going, Mags?
Girl, I hear girl. I keep it warm, as best as I can.
That's the important thing. What are you doing, Catherine?
Keep it warm, darling.
Good, good.
And nice.
That's all I need to hear. You know, just fun, porridge, red herring.
Yeah.
So I ain't gonna ask how I do.
Oh, please.
Oh, please. Come on.
Wait,
please.
Just wait. I don't ask George how I'm doing yet either. I have to find out from the 2 people in the cold first.
Oh, first. So you're playing smart. Is that what cold first?
Yes. Hi, George. How you doing, Georgie?
I'm fine, except that it seems like I'm sliding down the totem pole a lot. I got attacked by a cock today, a rooster.
What? You joking?
Yeah,
George, how did that happen?
I don't even seem to have any clout over my residence. Those of you who've been here know that you got to go through a gate, come into my parking lot. You know that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm leaving the place today, and there's a rooster on the road chasing after a hen. Okay? And you know what he wants. And I decided to leave the lady alone. So I opened the gate. The hen ran through the gate, and I locked the rooster out. And when I came out through the gate, the rooster attacked me.
Getting in the way.
Pardon me?
That makes sense.
That's the best thing I've heard.
I mean, come on, guys. Come on. I pay rent.
That's a good one.
That is so funny.
The way.
That one is very good.
That's a jealous rooster.
Trained by Jerry George.
How dare you go and
exactly
the rooster? Eh?
The man's love life. Come on.
Oh my.
So that's what it's about.
Teach you a lesson.
Those people business.
You know,
Exactly.
You know, we're sitting here laughing at this, but when it's happening, you don't see the humor in it. You see yourself being a
It's too frightening. What's going on?
I know.
Save thyself.
I can well imagine, George, but that is the joke of the day. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway. By the way, Mr.
I'm sorry George didn't have his camera now.
I know. Well,
good music.
You know.
Oh gosh.
Good
That would have taken nice.
That moment, yes.
No, I spent the greater part of the day attending a 2-day workshop. Well, the first of a 2-day workshop on climate change, and I would have been trying to save my battery because I had to do interviews down there. So the rooster got away, but let me tell you, I've got that bugger marked. And I'm going to catch it. If he thinks he got away with that, forget it.
Yeah. That is funny.
Yeah, Margaret, you would think it's funny.
Of course it is.
It's funny.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious, George.
Only in Grenada.
Yes. And I see you're not wearing Hawaii shirt tonight. the other George, the George with the name in the other place. I don't know which one you get it right.
What is that?
One have the George first, one have the George last. So I don't know which one of them get it right.
You already get it a George, don't worry. Call that George.
Yeah. And how are you doing in sunny St. Vincent?
I'm very well, thank you. It's windy where I am.
Okay, good.
And it's not sunny at this time.
And
In case you didn't notice.
Who says in St. Vincent anyway?
Exactly.
Up to now, we don't see the itinerary yet, you know. So who knows?
You got to talk to payroll. That salary has to be docked.
It's fast.
No.
The memo is on its way.
Yeah, send it by snail mail. That's fine.
By the way, guys, before you bung away, I think you need to say good evening to parish number 7. I see John is out there saying good evening to you folks. Why don't you say good evening to John?
Hi, John.
Hello, John.
Hello, John.
Dear John.
You know, there was a show on TV by the name of Dear John, right?
Dear John, yes.
Yeah.
I know a song. Dear
No,
John.
but there was also a show up here by the name of Dear John.
No, I didn't know the show at all.
Yeah, comedy.
Oh,
It's a sitcom.
okay. Okay.
They still make those things, sitcoms?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
There are loads of them around.
They're still on there.
Yeah, they're still sitcoms.
Well, they used to have some funny ones. I really don't watch much TV anymore. I'm as bored with TV as I am with a lot of other stuff that goes out as entertainment. It's not stimulating, you know?
The only thing I just watch now is documentary.
Occasionally, Bev, if I happen to be passing by the television set, I will flick on to CNN 302 to see whether the World War has yet started. You know? But other than that, I really don't bother with television anymore because I do everything on my smartphone.
No, well, I have my one or two faves that I still look at. There's still some good television out there. You just have to find it. There's good television out there.
Well, I mean, you're talking about things like not NPR, but what's the other one? Max?
No, even on network productions, you still have some good shows out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are good shows out there.
Yeah, I guess if you watch TV, you'll see them, but...
Yeah. I love TV. What can I say?
I'm like you, George. I'm a phone person.
Yeah. I can tell.
No, but you know, the funny thing is though, I'm a funny TV watcher. You know, I can't like sit and look at TV like that. You know, like some people will sit and look at TV. I sit, but I'm doing something else. So I'm looking at TV, but I'm doing something else, which makes audio very important because I listen a lot more than I actually look. So,
Mags, I don't think it was necessary for you to say that because everybody who watches you here on Thursday nights knows that you just ignore us. I mean, you're doing your work. Look at Margaret tonight. You see her working there doing
I'm not
everything.
doing anything.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, I don't. But I'm actually listening. I listen very well. Yeah.
And yeah,
yes,
John is also saying the people on parish number 7, that's CARICOM, are asking why independence celebrations are different to Grenada. By the way, I think yesterday they had it in their celebrations in Petit Martinique, and today CARICOM. Is it?
I know they were in Petit Martinique, but I don't know if they were in CARICOM.
Okay, I'm not sure either.
But
this is early though. This is January 31st.
No, Petit Martinique usually has its independence celebration about a week before the rest of the country. So that usually happens. Yeah. Well, this evening, folks, yes, next week, this time, Grenada will be celebrating its 45 years.
Yep. It is.
45 years as an independent nation. 45 years since that relationship with good old Mother England changed. 45 years since we broke the chains of colonialism. And set ourselves free. 45 years. An independence that was fought and won. Well, the independence from Britain was not really fought so much against Britain. That was fought more among the people in Grenada. Some wanted it, some didn't want it. Now, looking back on history, they say, oh, we wanted it, but just not under Gary. I don't know, independence is independence. I don't know that Gary would have made it a different type of independence. You're either independent or you're not. But that happened. Independence came, and here is Grenada, 45 years later, a revolution later.
You're right. East Grenada tried something.
Yes, but Grenada has an extremely rich history,
Extremely.
Really, really rich history. A very important history in this Caribbean region. But we downplay it because, as Catherine says, we're so ashamed of who we are and what we do. We just feel like, let's not talk about it. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. But it's real. Even Grenada's independence was special. It's probably the only country that they shut off the electricity on the day of independence. So you became, those are things that are so unique to Grenada. But we downplay these things. These
Margaret
was probably the one who flipped the switch.
That's what
But so many things, so many points of interest are there that people should proudly stand on and say, that was Grenada, Only in Grenada. I had to put a flashlight on the flag the first time it went up. But you don't hear about these things in the history of the country. But happy independence, Grenada. It should be a happy independence. It is something to celebrate. But what we need to do is make it worthwhile, make it meaningful, and stop making happy show with freedom and democracy. That's what we need to do. So that's not on the menu to talk about tonight at all. As a matter of fact, this time of the year, we're not usually so interested in talking about independence, we wait till March 13 come. That is what we like to talk about, revolution, not independence. The February 7th can come and go with the usual pump and pageantry, but we get excited March 13, right? And not because of the election last year. Because of what that date stands for as far as the revolution goes. So we'll get to that at some other point closer to the date. Tonight, here's another revolution taking place, and that is a different kind of revolution again because it's in Venezuela. So we have on our menu this evening, we want to take a little look at Venezuela to see how things are developing. We say CARICOM to save Venezuela. That is my headline. And we have the big one in Guyana, where the court has handed down its ruling in that no confidence motion case. And then we're going to hop over to St. Vincent, or we're very much in the court tonight, because there was a very interesting case in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that was ruled on. It's this week.
This is just another one. We had how to bring here already. We already wanted to piece together. This is just another one.
At least, and I am happy that St. Vincent uses its courts. even though the petition's not going anywhere, you know, but St. Vincent is its courts to test things. So we want to look at that case and why it's important to us as we look at it in the whole context of independence and democracy, and that independence came for the people, but really making puppy show with it. So our first stop is going to be Venezuela. CARICOM heads, they went off to a meeting with the UN Secretary General. CARICOM heads led by the chairman of CARICOM, who is Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris from St. Kitts Nevis. He, along with Dr. Keith Rowley from Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada's Foreign Minister, Peter David, and the Secretary General of CARICOM, His Excellency Ambassador Erwin LaRocque. That delegation went to the UN headquarters in New York, Howell, New York. Something have to be really important to get me up there this time of the year, boy. But they decided that no sub-zero temperatures away from this meeting because
it wasn't there yet. It wasn't there yet.
Look here. As far as I'm concerned, it's sub-zero a long time. The moment things freeze, I learned that freezing point is 0. So if you're freezing, if you're sub-zero, you're gone below. What? Our delegation,
you really need a glass.
Our delegation left the sunny Caribbean to go to the UN, meet with the UN Secretary General to talk about Venezuela.
And what happened?
After they went to the UN, to the OAS meeting with the fragmented vote. Who vote yes, who vote no, who abstain, who absent. And now they're going back to the same people to have a meeting.
With the same split among them.
With the same split, So I really don't know what they plan to achieve because the news release which came out today after day 2 says that the delegation is satisfied that the mission had obtained its objectives. But I don't know what the objectives were.
Have you ever seen a press release from any one of these sessions that says anything else?
Yeah.
We had a successful meeting. Such and such was successful. This was successful. You ever seen anything that's different? Expecting too much.
And listen to all the big words now to comfort the people. And the delegation had also sensitized its interlocutors on the concerns and views of the community, to which there were positive responses. So somebody can tell me what that means. I'd be happy to know.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because what the news release says is that the community, which is a CARICOM, has restated its willingness to provide its good offices and to work with like-minded countries towards dialogue.
I'm sorry, friends. I'm very sorry. But here's what, right? In all of that, Dr. Keith Rowley heads off to the UN too. A couple months ago, Trinidad worked out a deal with Venezuela to use their dragon gas, steal and produce gas, sell it, and give Venezuela some of the money. Well, yeah, that was part of the deal. In a sense, it circumvented the sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuela.
But who imposed sanctions, though? There was no universal thing. The United States, the only person that had their issues.
Right.
That's the United States.
Yes. Yes, the United States. And the very first thing you hear coming back is that the minister is questioning now what position is this deal really in? He went out to do the deal. He never told the Trinidad public or the media what the deal was. I'm only saying that to say, we go to all of these things and they just back home say to you, that stuff you've been doing, what is that all about?
But everyone in the Caribbean knows the United States' position on Venezuela and know that the UN is an extension of the US, I would say. So you can't expect to go into the UN and get some different kind of outcome from what you're going to get from what's coming out of the US. It's not going to be any different.
Maybe that's why nobody takes the UN seriously.
Yeah, but why is CARICOM fragmented on the issue of Venezuela rushing to the UN? For what?
That's the point. And Margaret said it right. Nobody probably takes the UN seriously, but at the end of the day, the UN gets it way.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line of the story.
Let's face it, folks. You can say what you want about imperialism and the US this and the US that. The US, of course, is doing what it is doing in its own interests, and everybody knows that. But on the flip side of the coin, US dollars run the world. And we say it in certain circles that money talk, but when it comes to the US, we behave like US dollar don't talk, or it should only talk when we want it to. The entire world trades in US dollar. The world. Even if you're in Europe, all conversions are made according to the US dollar. It has strength. That nation, despite who is its president, it has clout, it has power. It may not have no standing, but it has clout, and it has power because of the weight and strength of its currency. It's the only country that doesn't.
The only country that does not have to buy dollars to do business
is the US. Exactly. And the entire world trades in US dollars. China has been trying forever with its yen to get in there, not going anywhere. The euro, when the euro dollar came on the scene, still not getting there. The only dollar is the US dollar. And we try to behave like the US is not going to use that to leverage its position for whatever it wants in the world. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying what they do is right in many respects, because the US has caused a lot of chaos in places where they shouldn't have. They've made bad decisions. They've killed a lot of people, hurt a lot of people, destroyed a lot of economies and countries because of what they do. But at the end of the day, the point I'm making is that they are able to leverage their position to do these things because of the might of their money out there.
But now, what I was going to ask is, and what does that say about us? What does that say about human beings in general?
Okay, let me put it this way. The world, human beings like a superpower. The world has always had a superpower. There's Rome, then Britannia ruled the waves. It's for some reason we seem to like that kind of construct. I think the superpower now.
No, I'm not even thinking in terms of that. I'm just thinking, what does that say about us? That we choose the easy way out as opposed to taking a principled stand, even if the stand may be painful. And I mean, I'm not just talking about Venezuela. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking in general. Look.
But
what does that say about human beings?
No, what stand can you take? Because at the end of the day, if people are coming back to how to do in business, how you eat and stuff like that, what stand can you take? Which of us are going to sit by and say, I'm going to starve? I'm going to allow myself to be put out on the streets. Not all of us going to do.
No, but it's the same thing which happens on a small scale, Margaret. We're in our countries, you're in the diaspora, we're in our small countries, things are happening. And the majority of people just choose to stay out of it and stay quiet because they don't want their little comfort zones ruffled.
Yeah, to be ruffled. That's exactly the point.
And on a
I think, and that is what troubles me more than the whole argument about the US dollar and its might and its whatnot and everything else. That troubles me more than anything else, because it says that's why I asked the question, what does it say about the human condition?
No, but that I'm making a point with that, I belabor the point because I want to ensure that we understand that this is the point I'm making. Venezuela has been in shambles for years. Not a soul pay Venezuela any mind until the United States get up and say, look, we're going to do something. And all of a sudden, the rest of the world, CARICOM and everybody else galvanized into action. And we're like, where are these Johnny come lately from? When people fleeing Venezuela in droves, hundreds of thousands, millions of people fleeing Venezuela, where were all of you? Not a soul said anything. But now that the United States has opened its mouth and everybody feel like a little feather pot may just get burned. All of a sudden.
I think, I agree with you in a sense, but from a different perspective though. Because while I agree that Maduro has to go and has done, everything that's just absolutely horrible, we have to admit that the US started its interference in that government long before Maduro was there. There was the attempted coup sponsored by the CIA and all of that stuff and everything else. But nobody said anything when that happened then. You understand? So this is what I'm saying, and this is why I'm saying I'm agreeing with you, but I'm also coming from it.
Said anything,
Wait, where was the Caribbean? Since we're talking about the Caribbean, where was CARICOM in that? Outside of your usual suspects.
Well, at that time,
you understand what I'm saying?
CARICOM did not have the picture carry, so in a sense.
Oh, so it could have just
didn't matter.
It was all right.
Exactly.
It didn't matter.
That's the point. But that's the point, Margaret.
You understand?
Let's face it.
And for me,
right now,
and
that is shown by CARICOM is interest that has been born and nurtured by Petrocari, not a genuine interest. And therein lies the hypocrisy of every single body, because it's not about inevitably about the people who are suffering, but it's about the interest. The US is not interested in the Venezuelans who are suffering. The only reason why the United States is interested in Venezuela is because of the oil. That's why it is. Because if you are interested in human rights and everything else, then let's just look next door at Guatemala. But you're not seeing anything there. You understand what I'm saying? And the Soviets, and hear me, the Soviets, Lord have mercy, the Russians and the Chinese, they ain't care nothing about the Venezuelans either. It's all about their interest and establishing their foothold. So getting gold and oil.
Exactly. So once again, you have the superpowers coming and fighting their wars, not on their soils, but on our soils, because we are stupid enough to allow them to fight those wars on our soils.
But Margaret, that's the point. You pointed out all the different players and what has, in my mind, conflicted them, right? There's one thing I've been saying from day one on this issue. Nobody has been paying attention to the Venezuelan people.
Yeah.
And back to the Petrocari, we in these parts receive hundreds of millions of dollars.
Which we never from those same people.
From the same people. But the people who are trying to pretend that they're fighting from a position of moral, they're doing so because they got for themselves personally. They are protecting their position, using the nation as the front. So you hear all this fancy talk, right? You hear all this. When they get carted off to Venezuela, we think paying all this. They get put up in the best hotels. They get fed it. Who you think paying that? It's the same Venezuelan people. The same Venezuelan people who paying. But they're trying to pretend that they're this so moral and so upstanding, support what? What they fear and what they see. I think it's two things actually. One, the fair exposure of what they have been doing. Because they know that if this government goes, a lot of what they have been doing will suddenly come to light to people in terms of their monies and stuff, because any administration that takes over after this one is going to investigate that whole CARICOM thing. So they don't want that to happen. And secondly, many of them have had all kinds of freeness and all the rest of it put their way. You think they care about us? Which of them have ever asked, which of these countries have ever asked its population, what do you think about the Venezuela situation? Not one. They cart off on their own. Sometimes we don't even know when they go. We just hear that some prime minister being here. They don't care about us.
And that is why everyone is now galvanized into action, because it's not about the people of Venezuela, as have been said here for the last 5 to 10 minutes. It's all about, you have two major camps. One camp that wants to keep Maduro as president, and one camp that wants him to go.
Right.
And nobody's asking the people of Venezuela whether or not they want him. They don't care. None of these two camps. And in the midst of it, you have the leader of the opposition who stepped up and declared himself interim president. And all of a sudden, all of this stupid talk about how can he do that. He has power and authority to do that. He can. Because in the midst of it, he is the only one who's probably saying, look, let's go back to an election. Right? I absolutely do not agree with the US trying to dictate who should contest the election. Venezuela has its own rules about who should contest and how people qualify to contest. So whosoever, if Maduro wants to contest, let him. If the people want him, they'll vote for him.
Yeah, but Beverley, it goes back here. It's about interest there.
It's all about interest.
It's all about interest. It's not about human beings. It's not about people at all.
And that's why I said nobody asks the people
how they feel.
How they feel about this. But you have these two camps, the Maduro must go and the Maduro must stay camp, that are opposing and fighting and bringing more pressure on an already exploded situation. Because it's not even explosive anymore. It exploded a long time.
You see the other side of that, right?
Beverley,
George?
Beverley, let me ask you a question. You're talking here about nobody asking the people how they feel. Don't you think the mass exodus that you're seeing from Venezuela right now is one way of saying how they feel?
Indicative of that.
It is, but there are a large number of Venezuelans still in the country because the figure that I hear is 25% has left, so 75% still there.
There you go. Okay, before you guys continue, I just don't want to leave out the folks on Facebook. John is saying 40% of Venezuela's income comes from the United States for oil.
It is Venezuela's biggest trading partner. And people,
it's all about oil.
Or they ignore it.
It's all about oil.
On the other hand,
they don't say it's all about oil on one side. It's all about their livelihood on the other side. So you can't say America is all about oil. America is buying the oil from them, right? And in exchange, giving them money. So why aren't they seeing the money that they're getting as important? It's not a one-way story.
Yeah, it comes back to the same thing.
Sharon Elizabeth Roberts is saying, Margaret, you're so correct. America and the other islands, as a matter of fact, do not care for anyone unless it's in their interests.
But that's who said it? They're not permanent friends, they're permanent interests. It was not America who made up that, That is something how the world has been constructed. So that's why I went back.
Well, I think particularly on that too, and I think too we also need to think about on this side of the world. Certainly, the United States has, with the Monroe Doctrine, which pretty much states that nobody is coming into. There's nobody from Europe coming on this side of the world.
Right.
The United States must be the only person that's a dominant factor here.
And let's face it, when that happened back then, when the Monroe Doctrine was proclaimed, it was in the interest of the world, because you had Hitler, they're trying to destroy the world, and they were trying to reconstruct the world.
But they also didn't want the rise of monarchy on this side of the turf either.
Exactly. So sometimes we try to oversimplify a very complex situation.
Yeah, the thing is, and you're right, Jerry, about the complexity of that, because I mean, even Venezuela is complex. I mean, it's like building blocks. One thing builds on the other, and it builds on the other, and it builds on the other. So, but in today's media environment, the inclination is to just, simplify everything without seeing it in its full context.
Let's look at Maduro and why people call him illegitimate. The last election, Maduro run who he wanted to run, kill who he wanted to kill, imprison who he wanted to kill. So nobody could run against him. How could that be right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, how
could that be right?
Certainly, looking from our perspective, looking at Maduro as an individual, I mean, really and truly, you cannot justify his behavior on no account.
No.
The Venezuelan people have a right to determine their own destiny, but you don't have a right also to do what you're doing either. And it really doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you're on. I mean, it's just a matter of, if somebody is a despot, they're a despot. And clearly this man is a despot.
And I will talk about then, Margaret. Hold on, let me continue. When the National Assembly won, what did he do? He selected his own Supreme Court of judges, right? And said, no, these are the people who really going to run Venezuela. Somebody made the point. It's like right now, Democrats and Republicans. Suppose the Democrats took the torment, Trump the torment. See them Democrats and getting too much support. See that Nancy Pelosi did. Let's form our own little gathering and run America. Maybe let's assume let's take the Supreme Court and run America. Forget the Democrats. You're smiling, eh? But that is precisely what has happened in Venezuela, and that is what people are defending. People who live in the United States of America who wouldn't countenance that happening. Trump getting up one day and say, forget about them Democrats. You see the Nancy Pelosi, she too much. Now we make your own thing over here and run the country. Americans who will not accept that are defending Trump.
But Jerry, once upon a time I might agree with you. Today I'm not so sure.
You'll be right to it. I think you have a point.
Today I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure.
Wait, we sneak past for break time, we better take it now.
Yeah, we should take it now indeed. Excuse me.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, neighbor.
Here's the bill I asked you to pay for me.
How did you get your electricity bill to be so low?
For one, we size our transformers just for what we need. And we unplug transformers, chargers, and other devices when they're not in use. We also replaced our light bulbs with LEDs.
They burn less energy, right?
Much less. I even replaced the seal on my refrigerator door to keep the cold air in.
And Grenlec is always advising us not to open the fridge too often.
That's right. And my family washes and irons in bulk.
With fuel prices changing all the time, how do you know if it is working?
We pay attention to the usage history table. Over time, our average usage has decreased.
So while Grenada can't control fuel prices, I can conserve energy and save money.
GRENADAB, energizing our Grenada.
Welcome back to this edition of Mek We Chat. We've been talking about the Venezuela situation, and I just see somebody putting up in a completely different, I don't know if it's the same feed, but they were speaking about the fact that Guyana is part of CARICOM, that Venezuela has made some incursions into Guyana, and some of the same leaders have not said a word.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah,
I remember
and then we complain.
Yeah, I remember when that Bird Island issue was hot. You know, it kind of like ebbs and flows, right? So in one of those moments when it was hot, nobody said anything. It was like, where was CARICOM?
But Scared has given it away, so it make no difference now. A next generation of Dominicans are going to get up and ask questions about that thing, because it's crazy.
He did? Who he gave it to?
We give it to Bird Island, belongs to Venezuela. Venezuela has claimed Bird Island.
Right, I remember that. Oh, but I didn't know that he gave it up. Okay.
Well, I put it that way.
Okay.
Yes.
I was in Dominica, standing not too far from same Chavez. Mm-hmm. And Chavez pointed out there and said that's where Venezuela starts. I asking nobody else, you know. Sit down there.
That was what you call a sweetheart deal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's that?
George.
George, we're hearing something coming through. Okay.
George?
Yeah.
Let's move it right along.
Right. Yeah, so folks, we have to keep our eye. We should have been keeping our eye on Venezuela all the time. And
but let me say something, Bev. The European Union today voted 204 to 1 something to support Guaido. So notice that it is growing. Mm-hmm. You see, if people had support for Maduro of a start, when they started to really watch his performance, forget the ideology, right? Yeah. And I think that is what is happening. Cuba has to Cuba is supporting
Maduro,
because without Cuba, Maduro would have fallen. It is Cuban intelligence and their military who is his, not even Venezuela, his insiders. Mm-hmm. And you can understand why Cuba done it, because Venezuela saved Cuba from, Chavez really saved Cuba from crashing after the Soviet had left them. Yeah. So you can understand their support.
So at that level and on that front, there's a lot of movement going on and certainly a lot of things at stake. But I say those who know people in Venezuela, they may have friends or family in Venezuela. If there is any way that we, the ordinary people, can help the ordinary people in Venezuela, I believe we should find a way to do that, because their needs are many, their needs are great.
You know, when it touched me, Beverly, when I saw stories where people who were leaving the country were leaving their children, paying people what money they had to keep their children, their young children. That really just broke me up. Mm-hmm. Just broke me up.
Yeah, so if there is any way, organized, one-on-one, whatever ordinary people can do to help ordinary people, we should do it, because it is clear that those who sit in seats of authority and in positions of leadership are not leaders, and they don't care about anything but their own interests. So leave them, let them fight their war, and let us, the ordinary citizens, fight our war and take care of ourselves and build our countries and build our communities, because they're going to crash and burn. They are going to crash and burn, for sure. And we don't need to go along for that ride. You know, all this urgent, the people need attention. So anyhow we can find a way to help them, we should. That is what we should focus on, instead of getting caught up in all of the noise and the brouhaha. with all these special interests who fighting their own battles.
Well, it seems like somebody named Byron Bridgman here on Facebook tends to agree with you folks. Byron is saying, why can't the US and the European Union send food aid to help the people of Venezuela instead of a regime change? What's about the inhuman situation that is now unfolding in Yemen today? This needs more urgent attention than Venezuela. So says,
but let's face it.
That Yemen story is
another story.
It's another
Let's
story.
Let's look at Venezuela for the right. Would sending food in fix the problem? And I say that food shouldn't be sent in. Don't get me wrong, because I've been the person who have been belaboring this point. But this has gotten beyond just a simple humanitarian situation where people are caught outside of their borders and you have to support them. Because America has been supporting the 3 million people who are outside Venezuela from the various countries that they have gone to. But we're talking about what is happening, what is causing them to run. So simply providing food inside the borders would not fix the problem in Venezuela.
And you see, Byron Bridgman said something which is the something that is not going to happen. And that is why I put it the way I did. I said that we, the ordinary people, need to find a way to help the ordinary people, or anyhow we can help the ordinary people, we should. The US and the EU, Russia, China, Syria, that is not their interest. They don't care. So those who have friends and family or who just care as one human being to the other, we should seek to find ways that we can help. If you can help one person in Venezuela today, it will make a difference. The powers that be will continue to fight, like I said, until they crash and burn, because they will. But the ordinary people are caught up. They are just casualties of war. So if we can help them, we should. It's what they are going through. Nobody sitting in their little comfort zone would want to be going through it. Nobody. So if there is some way to help, please do, because there's not going to be any organized help coming from the people who have other interests and other things that they are fighting about. So we also have on our agenda this evening, this is a very exciting one. I love this one. The Supreme Court. Chief Justice Roxanne George, we're talking about Guyana now, this afternoon, Thursday, January 31st, ruled that 33 is the majority for the purposes of carrying a vote of no confidence in the Guyana Parliament. The Chief Justice says, all of you put out the stupidness. You have 65 people in the House. Majority is 33.
A simple case of mathematics.
So all these Athie Martin,
yeah, he did say he was going to join. You guys didn't see the email.
Hi, Athie.
He did say he was going to try to join.
Well, he has.
It is so great to see Athie.
Yeah.
Oh my!
Last time I saw Athie was in a suit living coat. Looking as distinguished as ever.
We want to hear your voice now, Athie. Come start.
We're not hearing you. We just see your mouth moving and laughing, and we can't hear a thing.
And you need to bring down your camera some more so that those of us here can see all of your face.
Wow.
No, that's good.
Better. That's much better. Folks, we've been joined by Athie Martin, one of the usual suspects that Dominica has been trying very hard to keep away from us.
To desuspect us from.
So
well, let me say Happy New Year to all of you.
Yes,
thank you, Athie, and to you.
Same to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that makes me an unusual suspect.
Yeah.
No, man.
Yes.
No,
You're usual suspect.
You guys doing? Everybody good?
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hanging
Yeah. We just finished chatting about Venezuela and we're on to Guyana.
Well, let me hear Athie's view on Venezuela. Might be interesting.
Yeah.
You hear, Athie?
Athie hearing us?
I am hearing you, yeah. And something just happened to my screen, so I don't know exactly. It's been some time since I've done this, so I'm a little bit out of practice. So just bear with me a little bit.
But we hear you, so you could just speak all the time.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so what's up? What are we talking about tonight?
No, I was asking you what your views on the Venezuela situation. That's what we just finished talking about.
Ah, okay. I mean, I just read an interesting, if disturbing, commentary by Ron Saunders. I found it disturbing because it's duplicitous.
Oh gosh, man.
And it's double standard. It's a razor blade cutting on both ends. It's interesting how people of that caliber can resort to, ignoring the violations of the democratic practice and procedure in our own islands, and then all of a sudden, because the political imperatives are different, can seek to invoke the same democratic principles with regards to Venezuela, calling on us to sort of engage in dialogue and to assist as a region in restoring, the rule of law, etc. What happened to all the violations of rule of law and the fractures of democracy that occur in our own islands on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm.
And they invoke instead this spurious claim of interference in the internal affairs of each other's countries and so forth.
All tired
So I'm very disappointed because Ron is somebody I know. I have interviewed Ron, spoken with him, and I find his objectivity has been tainted, and it leaves me to conclude that money really rules the minds of the Caribbean people, particularly the Caribbean intellectuals. So
I have said it before, that maybe 10 years ago, possibly, 10 years or more ago, I used to look forward to reading a Ronald Sanders piece.
Absolutely.
I would go searching for it. I would hunt it down. And then over the past few years, I'm like, what? This is not the same person. So I no longer look forward to reading his pieces. I don't.
I could tell you, when the government changed in Antigua, that's when his viewpoint totally took a twist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. Because I did not make the connection at that point, but I noticed the total change in his writings, and I no longer enjoyed reading them. And now I find it utterly distasteful because all he does is echo the political directorate as if he has no mind of his own, no opinion of his own. Who's he writing for?
But what I find amusing is that his stance on the US. I mean, I find these people sometimes I just find amusing. Anyway, go ahead, Athie.
No, just saying. I mean, but even with regards to Venezuela, when in fact in 2015 there was the election to the National Assembly and the opposition forces won the majority of seats in that, and then Maduro, in his wisdom, actually just declared them, non-existent and created his own assembly. Where were these voices?
Not one of them said a word.
Where were the so-called defenders and protectors of democracy in Venezuela? Why didn't they speak up then? And all of a sudden, because there is in fact a legitimate constitutional action taken by the head of that body. I mean, because it runs afoul of the political allegiance of the directorates of their respective countries. He finds the voice to sort of, say that, I mean, this is in violation of the Constitution and the laws of the country. And so, I mean, this makes such a mockery of ourselves. We are small and not very well endowed and not doing very well. And the last thing that we have going for us is, if you will, our intellectual integrity. And for us to lose that on the world stage, I mean, I watched our Dominica ambassador, Mrs. Lorraine Bannis Roberts, make such a fool of herself and embarrass Dominica at the Security Council. That,
she was reading a statement. I think she just read what they gave her to.
Yeah, she just read what they gave her. But the point is, but you see, without people of backbone who would stand up and say, I will not do this. We might as well be Hitler's generals in Europe, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. We might as well, because they burned the Jews in the ovens, knowing that it was wrong, only because, and they tried to hide behind, orders were given from on top. Come on. Yeah. So there's too much of that has gone on in the Caribbean. I'm afraid it has compromised our ability to even restore a sense of decency to our region.
Yeah, but that is why none of the institutions pay attention to us.
Yeah, nobody takes
because we're conflicted, totally conflicted.
Nobody takes when Dominica violated constantly over the last 3 elections all the well-established procedures for free and fair elections, where were they? Why didn't they speak up? We remain the only island with a voters list that is larger than the local population. Where were they? Where are they? The only island without voter identification cards. Where are they? The only island that spends $30 million on a 3-week electoral campaign. Where were they?
50-something thousand people.
I mean, come on, guys, So
true, Athie. And those points are exactly along the line of the points that we have been making earlier.
Yeah.
All the hypocrisy and outright stupidity of those in CARICOM in positions of leadership.
Absolutely.
They have no sense of what it takes to be a leader. They're not ready. They're not called. They're not fortified to be leaders. Yeah. But they occupy these positions. And all they do is carry everybody to a slippery slope, and we continue to slide downward.
Yeah.
So we had just come to look at Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
And although we took the first break late, we should probably just take that break before we start talking about Guyana, although we read a little piece. Let's take the break, George.
Labukan Creative Center, in association with Spice Basket, presents Mayhem in Paradise.
All the time, man, you complaining I never had a steady job. Now I get an opportunity to get a permanent work. And woman, you acting up? I acting up? Yes, and you know why I didn't tell you, man? It's because of your stupid attitude, man.
Stupid attitude?
Yes.
You come this early morning pulling cutlass at me, right?
It's a play by Francis Uriah Peters, together with a nostalgic folk musical journey, plus the Tivoli drummers at Spice Basket, Wednesday, February 6th. Tickets from Grenadian Optical and Kittens Drug Mart at $40 each. Children 12 and under, $25 at the door. It's a special independence production of drama, folk music, and dance, produced by Uriah Peters, Wednesday, February 6th at Spice Basket, 8:30 p.m.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
I'm always on the move. Training, traveling, So it's good to know I have Co-op Bank in the palm of my hand.
Introducing e-banking, one of many customer convenience services from Grenada Cooperative Bank, and there's more to come.
It's swift, simple, and secure.
Welcome home.
At the moment, but we just want to have Athie Martin as one of the regular pace bowlers in the lineup.
Yes, it's okay to use cricket analogies again.
Yes, it's okay again. Once more. We have a full pace attack, you know.
You fair weather supporters, you know. Fair weather fans.
I am not the least bit ashamed.
But we listen, for all these years they have owed us a win. We will enjoy when they give us it.
Yes, and just before Athie came on, I had read from this little report in the Startup News that Chief Justice Roxanne George ruled this afternoon, Thursday, January 31st, that 33 is the majority in Parliament for purposes of carrying a no confidence motion. I mean, I was cracking up, laughing hysterically when these learned people raised the argument that half of the Parliament is 33 and a half. I don't know half, you know?
Half a man.
So an absolute majority can't be 33, it has to be 34. It's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Lawyers like to take the law and do all kinds of interpretations and spin it on its head. But this one took the cake. We really need to invent a new flavor of cake called 33 and a half. You know?
But you know, in a Freudian kind of way, it actually is quite accurate because a lot of the people who sit in the regional parliaments are half.
They can't make up or they can't make one.
And so in some cases, much less than half. So if they can all agree that we count them as half, that's fine. That's the beginning.
Oh gosh. But I have a question. So part of the judge's ruling too was that the dual citizenship issue, that was unconstitutional. So does it mean that the person who voted or was that parliamentarian legit in this case?
In the case, she's saying, listen, you never brought that matter to be adjudicated upon. But I can tell you, based on what I know, this is what she's saying. It's unconstitutional, but you need to bring that to the court.
Wow.
Yes, that's what she said. I tell you, lie something else, you know.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, I saw the 33 thing, and then I saw the thing about his thing being unconstitutional. And, you know, all these kind of questions started coming. I mean, then was the government legitimate? You know, any laws passed, were they legitimate? I mean,
she says you need to bring that to the court and test
wow.
it. But I'm telling you, from what I know, it's unconstitutional. But that was not brought to me.
Right.
So if you want to deal with that, bring that to the court.
Whoa.
Right. So that is another can of worms that has been opened.
But then the question is, how many countries would this be true of?
But and here's the other thing, too. I mean, right, you're right. But that is for Guyana though, because remember, their constitution has a section in it that specifically speaks to that. I mean, do the other Caribbean countries, do their constitution speak to that?
Yes.
Specifically?
Jamaica for sure. I know plenty of people in Jamaica. When I look on the list in Jamaica of the people who have given up their American citizenship because they want to serve in Jamaica, I was surprised. But the other constitution...
Does Grenada speak to that specifically?
Most of these islands do.
Yeah, definitely.
But nobody really forces it. But yes.
But people act in complete defiance of the constitutional provision.
But that's the reason why I asked, because, I remember these issues coming up before, and the whole question of people saying, well, if you remember the Commonwealth, it's a whole different story, as opposed to, so it was a different story if you were a Canadian citizen versus an American citizen.
Yes,
that's true. That's
true. There are anomalies that need to be ironed out to really make this thing mean A, B, or C. Because if you're a Commonwealth citizen, you can vote, or you can run for office according to what it says. And then, because, like in the case of Grenada, the Constitution says if you have sworn allegiance to a foreign power, and they argue that it can't be a foreign power if it's part of the Commonwealth. So as you say, it's the law, and all different kinds of interpretations come up under the law, and then you have to test it in a court to prove it one way or the other. Does foreign power include or exclude Commonwealth countries?
But Beverly, that is what is happening in St. Kitts with the opposition leader having a Dominican passport.
Absolutely.
That is being tested right now.
Exactly.
Wow. No, this is something that has to be straightened out.
I agree.
Because what we have to understand, when these laws were written, they were all written within a certain context, you know. And those who inherit it maybe do not know or do not fully understand the context in which these were written. So various interpretations now come into play. And that is why, in many respects, constitution reform is needed. But proper constitution reform is needed, not the stupidness that has been going on across the Caribbean.
Right, and I think it raises it points to a whole other thing that you started off speaking about earlier, than when you touched on independence. How independent are you? Because basically what you took was a British constitution, and I'm putting that in quotation marks. I'm using it really loosely, and just photocopied it and made it your own. You didn't adapt it, you adopted it.
Well, the British have no constitution, by the way.
I was about to say, it's not really adopted.
Basically saying why she says using it loosely, because I think she understands that too.
Yeah.
So it's not really adopted, it's written for us. And then it's not a pure British model.
Right.
Because there are aspects of it which are so American. It was adopted from the US. So the drafters of the Constitution pluck these things from various different places and put them together. And maybe that's why in many respects it doesn't work well.
Right, because those constitutions would have emerged, certainly in the United States, it emerged out of a particular situation and to suit their given situation. It came from their particular historical context and what they decided they did not want and what their beliefs were, and it was drafted against that.
There was a raison d'etre. We have no raison d'etre. We just want to handle something and say
right.
with that.
I mean, and which doesn't have to be a bad thing, because it doesn't mean that you can't look at what other people have and see, because it's not everything is. There are things that other people have that are quite workable and that are ideals to be cherished and aspire to. So I'm not dissing that, but I'm just saying you must also modify it to suit your given situation and work those things so that it works.
And we must do this in a peculiarly Caribbean way. We must take advantage of the fact that we are small countries with small populations. I mean, how long would it take to really conduct a genuine, broad consultation and dialogue with the populations of Grenada, for example? Tiny little country, small population. You could do that in a few months. You could give every single man, woman, and child in the country an opportunity to have their say. That's an advantage of small size that we could have turned to our advantage and truly created democratic constitutions. But no, we adored the altar of the law or the laws of the country and those laws that we adapted and adopted, rather than say, why don't we cut some new ground? Why don't we set some new precedents and make our contribution to the global democracy project by engaging in a full dialogue, because we are small and because our populations can in fact afford it. And every 5 years, mark you, the political parties engage in broad-based consultation of a kind with their populations. But why don't we do this with regards to the Constitution?
Because many of them don't want it to be changed from what it is. It gives them
Absolutely.
a lot of leeway to do a lot of nonsense.
Or their own or they only want changes to be made to suit whatever political objective they have at the time.
Definitely. That's it.
You know? So take, for example, the last referendum. It was a purely political campaign. There was nothing in it to engage the people and to have the people come to some kind of understanding of what this whole constitution change means, and to get the people to have a feeling and a sense within themselves that they own this constitution and they want to look at it in a way of whether or not changing it this way or changing it that way would make it better for them. That kind of education doesn't come through because the objective is not to educate anybody. The objective is just to continue to use the people for political objectives. And that is all it is. So here it is now in Guyana. All of a sudden, 33 is no longer a majority in parliament because somebody decided that we want to go and see if they can get another vote to overturn the government. I can never ever understand why is it that these people who think they are so popular don't want to go to the polls.
Well, they should have paid attention to James Mitchell's move how many years ago in St. Vincent? You know.
That's up to 2 days ago, you know. Exactly, that's up to 2 days ago.
You know, if you believe you're so popular and you're assured victory, go to the polls and then decide what are you afraid of.
Exactly.
No confidence vote was on the 21st of December. And as far as the Constitution of Guyana reads, as far as I understand it, it triggers a general election in 90 days.
Yeah.
And neither the Electoral Commission nor the ruling party has bothered with that. They're on their own merry little trips trying to say that no confidence vote was null and void. Obey the Constitution and more so obey the will of the people, man.
Yep.
No way, it ain't happening.
No, because we must remain in power and we don't care what nobody say, whether you want us or not, we go stay here.
That's it. You know, to do it, we here, we stay here.
We must stay here.
But unless that third force of journalists and civil society become much more aggressively active and much more persistently active, those things will continue to happen, because where are the voices of the Ron Saunders of the region, for example, on this Guyana, on election, on the fact that Dominica has, since 2005, had an illegal prime minister who has a French passport.
About St. Vincent.
You know, so I mean, where are their voices? So really, it still comes back. I mean, where the rubber hits the road is that if the existing institutions that were set up to protect the democratic rights and privileges of the people of the region are not doing it, somebody else better stand up and do it. And that somebody else is you guys.
One of the things I learned as a journalist is that you must speak truth to power.
All the time.
Speak the truth to them. But we don't have journalists in the region who will tell anyone in any position of power and authority anything to their face, which is true, if that truth is contrary to something that they are doing or something that they have just said. You're mad. I see where you're seeing that.
Yeah, but you know, it's beginning to be so encouraging in other countries of Africa, where when I see all the lawyers, hundreds of lawyers in their legal robes in certain countries of Africa, finally taking to the streets. Do you ever think we'll see that in the Caribbean?
Well, it has happened in Grenada. It has, and we saw the lawyers in Dominica take to the streets, albeit they say it wasn't a protest. The lawyers in Grenada have taken to the streets a few times on issues. They were out there about a month ago, not really marching the last time, but they just
they don't engage in that kind of activity.
Yeah, the president of the bar said they didn't want any bacchanalia, you know. They just went out and stood outside and made a statement, you know.
So you have your answer right there. On December 15th last, when we got tear gassed in Roseau for holding a public meeting, we didn't see any robes. There were no robes.
And that is a huge part of the problem, because we do not stand up for principles.
That's right.
It's like I saw this story with this gentleman in Margaret's country where she lived, bemoaning the fact that he voted for Donald Trump because he's a federal worker, can't get no money, and he has a daughter who has to be on some life support machine, and he's afraid that his electricity is going to be turned off. And my first reaction was, you better find some way to keep that child alive. But I was thinking, I can't say here. You see, but you better find some way to keep that child alive. Because when people were hurting just like you are now, it didn't matter to you. Donald Trump was the finest president, you know? But now that you are hurting, you think it's a different Donald Trump than the one you voted for? It's the same one. So get off of your hypocritical horse and go and continue support him, and just make sure you find a way to keep the child alive. And that is the problem we face even with people who talk about the protest, because they come out and they get angry when something affects them personally. But when other people are hurting, they don't stand on a principle and say, you can't do that to that man, you can't do that to that woman. As long as it doesn't affect them, that's it. They're done. So
we must not forget too that there are some really important extra-regional institutions that are also doing exactly what that gentleman has done. I mean, I'm reading a report here from the Inter-American Development Bank. It actually was published several years ago, but right after the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. But if you take today's reality in our islands into account, how can the IDB be saying that the region is on the right path? In 2013, they were saying we were on the right path. We have strong economies, they said, with solid foreign currency positions, they said, you know, with low levels of debt. That is 2013. And the Inter-American Development Bank is saying that and publishing that, you know. And in 2018, can we say that we were on the right path, that we had low debt, that we had currency stabilized positions and strong economies and a sound and well-regulated financial sector? The IDB is saying that officially to the world.
In 2008?
In 2013.
Oh,
4 years after.
5 years after Kiko Baiko.
3 to 4 years after the financial crisis. I'm trying to make the point that, oh yes, we had a financial crisis, a global financial crisis, but you know, our region has come out smelling sweet. And 4 or 5 years, can we say that was the case? Was that the case? Is that the case?
So this is the only region in the world that has not recovered from the financial crisis.
Absolutely.
The only region in the world.
Yeah, but
we use it as an excuse all the time because we have not committed ourselves to fix it.
We continue to talk about it like it happened yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, but you see, we continue to allow these institutions and you know, to which we belong as countries and governments to sort of to promulgate this violently false, you know, in a position on us, that we still have palm trees waving in the breeze, we still drink rum, still playing steel band, still having a great fun and great time in the Caribbean. That's the image they're promoting.
It is.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, maybe we believe our own propaganda. I don't know.
And that is because we do not have the cadre of journalists who are going to speak truth to power. Because when these reports are prepared, nobody takes, neither the institution nor the ministers of finance or the ministries of finance in these countries who provide these information to these institutions for which I have just totally lost respect for so many of these institutions because they have just become mouthpieces for the political class. That's all they do.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you one that I have a problem with every time, the CDB. It's the Caribbean Development Bank. Every time you hear the CDB, they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Leah. Where's the development in that? No, I'm serious. Well,
they're developing debt.
Well, you're right, developing debt.
Yes.
Decade after decade, they have been pumping all of this money into Leah. And to me, if they had said to Leah where to get off the boat, things would have changed. But they come with a different excuse every time. Hundreds of millions of dollars. But they're supposed to be, when I see the Caribbean Development Bank do something that is really developmental.
Which has to be paid back by taxpayers.
Exactly.
Because it's the governments of the country, the people who control the purse. Because government is really a totally different kind of construct. But it's the people who control the purse of the country who borrow this money on behalf of the citizens. And we all have to pay it back. While they continue to sink in a black hole with poor management. A management team that's never held accountable for the problems of Leah. Never.
That's one that's annoying.
And you know,
this money.
But it is that, you know, I think, you know, the painful thing is that this article was reflecting the views of Luis Alberto Moreno, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, which is the hemispherical development bank. You know, and he was offering an explanation as to why he was saying that. And here's what he said. He said, our democratic governments are increasingly effective at reducing structural poverty and building infrastructure. And that this success, he says, is the result of 2 decades of wise policy and careful public management. I mean, this is the president of the largest hemispherical development bank saying that and writing that.
I mean, he's serious, and this is in reference to the Caribbean region, correct?
This is the entire Caribbean, Latin America region, which incidentally includes Venezuela.
But hold on. Well, if it's so good and you've reduced poverty and all this good stuff, then why do you have this mass exodus from Guatemala, Honduras, and up the chain?
Why does Uncle Donald? Why does Uncle Donald want to build a wall?
He wants to boost
was Dory, south of the border, he wouldn't have to worry.
Exactly. Because the reality is that these people don't want to leave their homes. They're leaving because of circumstances.
Absolutely. That's the point.
And that is why these institutions have lost credibility in their own right. Yes. Because they go around saying these things and publishing these things, and people totally disregard it because they know it's not true.
Oh, yeah.
You know that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So people, the news out of Guyana, because we're going to go on to other things, is that 33 is a majority. There is supposed to be a general election. So
a majority when related to 65, right?
There's a majority in a house of 65. Not 33. You can't measure it with 33 and a half.
But you know, I could make the case for 33 and a half, as Athie said. And beside that, if this guy has dual citizenship and you're telling me that that is illegal. If the man has dual citizenship,
listen,
it is half.
Margaret, if they come with that dual citizenship, then every single thing that he has voted on, they're going to have to roll it back.
That's okay, half.
Every law which has been passed.
It is a half a man, it's not a whole person.
Every law that he voted on will have to be unpassed.
That judge need to wheel and come again.
Yeah. Oh, this that. Yeah. This citizenship is half.
Exactly. Half Canadian and half Guyanese.
Definitely. So if that vote, it comes as half. Anything you vote on, it comes as half a man. That's half.
But they first need to determine which half of him voted.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Well, in this age of LGBT, it's quite possible.
Anything is possible. Yeah, right on that one.
Oh, God. No.
You all have no behavior.
No behavior. This
behavior.
morning was asking, what does a trans male do when he's having it, when it is having its period?
No, we're going to wait to see what other tactic.
I plead the fifth.
We're going to wait to see what other delaying.
No, it's not the fifth anymore. It's the fifth and a half.
Yeah, that too. Yes, for sure.
That is terrible.
Listen, you unruly suspects. We are going to wait to see what other delaying tactic the party which won the last general election, the coalition, is going to come up with.
Yeah.
Now that they have lost the 32.5 count, let's see where they go next.
There's a simple solution, they should start measuring these things in metric. Use kilograms. and then you will really see,
You'll see fractions. Then you will see fractions. Yeah, so we'll certainly be keeping an eye on this one to see what's the next move, because somehow that country don't seem inclined to go towards an election. So we also had on our menu, which we did tell our listeners about, that there was another court ruling, this time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And a quick background to that, which Jerry will give some more details on. We had some teachers in St. Vincent who wanted to contest the general election. So they had to resign from their jobs to contest the general election. And the sitting prime minister at the time, who is still the sitting prime minister today, told them that if they resigned the job and lost, they would get back their job. They lost, they didn't get back the jobs. And they took the matter to court, and that ruling just came out. So
this is once again being highlighted in another very striking court case. And it all speaks to governance issues, really and truly. So let's go back then in 2010, when these three gentlemen who were members of the New Democratic Party, they were emboldened because the Prime Minister passed the law. I can't remember if it's a law, but it to the extent that a person can contest an election and not be in jeopardy of losing their job. Because he said he wanted more, Margaret, he wanted more public servants. He wanted more public servants to come forward because he thought they had all the experience, etc., etc. So these guys, based on that, came forward. But they didn't just come forward. They actually brought it to the teachers' union, and the teachers' union had sessions of discussion. And then they came to an agreement that, yes, these people could resign their jobs, and after that, they can be reinstated. The Prime Minister himself was the witness to the agreement. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister signed the agreement as witness. So election passed, they all lost. So they obviously reapplied for the position. And the Public Service Commission told them, we don't have any jobs for you. That's what they told them, eh? They told them that the positions they had have been filled. We don't have any job for you, but you could still send in your thing, and if something comes up, we will find a place for you. Obviously, this was not the agreement. So when the agreement was brought onto the table, the Prime Minister said, listen to me, that agreement was aspirational. It had no basis in the Constitution. It's a something, no, let me try and give the facts, because these things upset me. It had no basis really in law, so to speak. But they had discussed it, and he knew when they were doing the discussion that it was aspirational, but he signed it. as something that can be done. So here's what
we have a clip, you know. We have a clip.
Okay.
We have a George. Yes, George gonna play that clip for us with what he said.
It is important for me to pronounce on another matter tonight. About 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks or so after the election, the leader of the opposition wrote me a letter about the re-employment of 3 teachers who ran for the NDP and who lost for them to be re-employed. He asked me privately in the house about the letter. And what is my response? I told him that you have written the wrong man on this matter. Under the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, under the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the authority which is responsible for hiring teachers is the Public Service Commission. All the time, Eustace says to me, the Prime Minister must not interfere with the hiring of any teacher or public servant, save and except permanent secretaries, which are within his remit under the Constitution. And I agree with him. I'm not involved. I agree with him. You resign, you lost. You had to resign because that's what the law says. The Constitution says so. You want to get back your job, you reapply. And when you reapply, it depends on whether there is any vacancy. And then that will go through the public servants in the Ministry of Education and then to the Public Service Commission. For instance, Ruth Woods had resigned and she got back a job, but not as principal, because you had to apply and compete with everybody else for the job of principal. And by the time she applied, there were other people whom the Public Service Commission would have assessed as being better in the job. So you have to come in the queue. They point out that under the agreement that it says the government will see that they are re-employed. I had pointed out to the Ministry of Education at the time that the provision is unconstitutional in the agreement. And they said, well, they have it covered by a clause in the agreement which says that that section of the agreement, like all other sections, is subject to the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I can't go above the Constitution. I want to say this. In the Constitution which was rejected, which Johnson campaigned against, which Elvis Daniel campaigned against, which Bash Thomas campaigned against, it had a provision in it saying that if you resign and run for election as a teacher, you will get back your job automatically. But they voted against that. So I accept that. You voted against that. So the Constitution as it is has to be applied. So that as far as Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister, is concerned, I'm not lifting a finger to help because it is not within my power to lift a finger to help. Neither am I lifting a finger to hinder because it is not within my power to hinder. The Constitution is there. I want to make that very plain. So that if they get back their jobs, it has nothing to do with me. If they don't get back their jobs, it has nothing to do with me. All I'm doing is following the law of the land. I want to make that absolutely clear. You know, I will tell you this, a number of those teachers didn't realize they had to resign. Elvis Charles didn't know he had to resign. I told him, I say, you know, you have to resign. I say, Elvis, if you don't resign, you can't run, you know, because that's what the Constitution says. I say, you sure you want to run? You sure you want to give up your work? He said, yes, he want to give it a chance. And when he lost, I said to him, remember, I can't get you back your job as a teacher. But I can get you back, I can get you a job as a senator because I have something to do with that. What I have to do with this
that the Conservative government signed with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union in 2005 is not unconstitutional, as you just heard the Prime Minister saying. The court also ruled on Tuesday that the 3 teachers who the government did not rehire after they were forced to quit their jobs at the last moment to contest the 2010 elections must be paid their pensions. One thing about people themselves. The St. Vincent Teachers Union has filed a case on behalf of the 3 teachers who contested the 2010 election on behalf of the main opposition party. The government did not rehire the teachers, all of whom lost at the poll. The union decided to challenge the matter in court, but High Court Judge, listen to this, when it first happened, the union decided to challenge the matter in court. High Court Judge Brian Cottle, where is Athie? That name rings a bell, Athie?
Yes, it rings a bell.
Okay, dismiss the case.
No.
Even
a little bit.
The little one. Dismiss the case even before a trial, saying that the union's case was, quote, entirely hopeless. Justice Cottle had said in his February 10, 2018 ruling, quote, when I consider, this is Justice Cottle, when I consider the competing arguments as well as my understanding of the government legal principles, I'm driven to the conclusion that the claimants cannot succeed. It may be that the present constitutional provisions are too restrictive, and some provisions along the lines of that set out in Article 16 of the agreement is desirable. Justice Cottle had further said that the matter is one for, quote, constitutional reform and not for his court. The claim is accordingly struck out as entirely hopeless, the judge had ruled. But in a decision handed down in St. Kitts Nevis on Tuesday, the Court of Appeals said that Justice Cottle erred in making that decision. The higher court ruled that the claimants had a legitimate expectation of success, saying that the government, in signing the collective bargaining agreement, committed itself to grant no pay leave to qualifying teachers to contest elections and to reinstate them if they were unsuccessful. Article 16 of the agreement says that a member of the union of at least 3 years standing shall, on application, be granted leave of absence to contest national, general, or local elections. The leave shall be no pay leave for not more than 6 months. In the event that the member is unsuccessful in the elections, they shall return to their original post or one of equivalent status, all benefits intact. The article further said that the resumption of duty must be at the beginning of the school term. The agreement was signed on behalf of the government of St. Vincent by the then Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Laura Brown, then Minister of Education, Clayton Bogan, and was witnessed by Prime Minister Gonsalves. But are you understanding what really happening here? A couple of weeks ago, we brought to your attention the ruling of the judge with respect to the Public Service Commission. No, the Public Service Commission. I'm coming to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
How that the judge used some scathing language, that there were people who were in the service for 30 years who had never been promoted, and people who did train were promoted. When asked for the seniority list, she said it was deliberately not presented. That's some strong language. Here is St. Vincent and the Grenadines, again, making this kind of position. But at the heart of this, again, is Justice Brian Pattle, who, in the case of the election petitions, sought to throw the matter out before it got anywhere, just like he did with this case. When taken to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal pronounced him to be afflicted with apparent bias and ordered that the case be returned to the court and dealt with expeditiously. 2 years have passed since. That's why I like what happened in Guyana. See what you like in Guyana. The vote of no confidence was on the 21st of December. On the 31st of January, it's been contested and they have a ruling. 3 years. Vincent and the Grenadines has petitioned before the court, just meandering. The last judge.
3 years and 3 judges later.
Exactly. So something has to be wrong. It has to be wrong.
Yeah.
In the country where people boast that we have the prime minister who is the most popular, the most brightest, and all of that kind of stuff. That's the level of governance that we have to live with.
Maybe the most illegal too.
You know? Because if the prime minister is saying that he's signing an article as witness and he refused to keep his word at that level to the country, what are we saying?
Yeah, I was thinking as I was listening to him and to you guys that, based on what I know of the public service, your ultimate boss is not, as a public servant, is not the politicians. No. I was thinking in the beginning that really and truly you should not have taken, but I didn't realize that there was also a signed contract.
Yes, there's a signed contract.
So,
and a contract, as I said to you, a signed contract based on, I can't remember if this was made legal or whatever, but the Prime Minister was the person who said he was making the move for more people in the public service to be able to offer themselves. So he made the thing, and it's based on that they actually made this move.
Yeah, because one can argue that they had a reasonable expectation.
Oh yeah, that's what the court says. The court says they had a right to that expectation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, this is the kind of stuff that is happening in our region.
We're talking about within the judiciary. We're talking about, and that's why I'm sorry I didn't get to have that lawyer on here tonight, because I had the question to ask him, how many times must a judge behave like this before he's removed from the bench?
Seriously?
Isn't there any mechanism within the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission to look at a judge who continues to do these kinds of things on the bench? Isn't there some kind of system to have him removed?
Well, and it's funny that you raised that, Bev, because that was kind of like a question that bugged me when they had the campaign for the CCJ. And it's a question that I asked, and I can't say that I've heard anybody answer that question at all. And basically, what mechanisms were there in place to discipline judges for bad behavior? I haven't heard an answer to that question at all. I mean, I don't know if anybody else here has heard it, but I have.
Yeah. In the case of the CCJ, it's the RJLSC which has the power to discipline the judges except the president. They can't discipline the president, but they can discipline the other judges. So that's the body with that kind of responsibility.
But do they and have they and...
No, will they? You expect them to?
That's the question, will they?
But here it is, this High Court judge who continues to have some ridiculous rulings that the Supreme Court has to overturn. And he's just there.
Let me ask you a question. Athie, has it been said in Dominica that it's common knowledge that this particular judge has said he don't think that any judge will rule against a sitting government?
That's not exactly what he said. What he said exactly is this: no sitting judge in the Caribbean will rule against a sitting government.
There you go.
Open and close quote.
Well, it is obvious.
So we are being the architects of our own demise.
Yeah, I mean, because
tolerate, somebody who even says that, and now he's just doing what he said.
Yes.
So so by that thing, if you're not going to rule against a sitting government, what hope is there for the ordinary citizen, who is very often the victim of those governments' actions?
Of the same government.
Yeah.
But if the judiciary is not prepared to adjudicate between the parliament and the executive, where are we going?
Well, we used to be able in the past to point fingers at other countries that were plagued by these idiosyncrasies. But can we point fingers at any other country when it's happening here? When the same thing that happened in Venezuela, just down the road, where judges appointed by the government kind of disbanded an electoral group in the National Assembly, an elected group of persons in the National Assembly. It's the same thing.
From them.
It's
Just
the same thing.
After Maduro lost most of the seats, he won only 55 of the 165 seats. And he went to the Supreme Court and tell them, strip them. Take away their powers.
And nobody's talking about those issues.
No.
They don't talk about those issues.
But it really begs the question. Really, it doesn't raise it because it's been raised by us and by many others before. But it begs the question: what now do we do? Is it that we must all find a way to find ourselves, at the OAS or at the United Nations or at the Commonwealth Secretariat, wherever, and eyeball these people and get persons from other countries who are experiencing the same anomalies in their societies so that the people of the developing world can build critical mass in demanding, that this be brought to an end. Apparently, the rule of law only seems to apply these guys when these guys are wearing their robes. When they're not wearing their robes, a whole other kind of law applies. And even so, one could say that the rule of law that applies when they're wearing their robes is not the law of the country. It's somebody else's law. It's the law of the controlling class, law of the elite.
Based on what?
The law of the powerful.
Based on that quotation, Athie, based on that quotation from Justice Cato, obviously, rulings are not made on law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These guys, and that's the problem we have with when you have corrupt politicians appointing corrupt justices to administer law in our society. What do you expect?
That's the best example of prejudice as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I mean,
the best example of prejudice.
We have constitutions that call upon us to appoint things called ombudsmen. How many of us have the ombudsman appointed? Could we ever foresee a situation in our islands where something like what is happening with the Mueller Commission investigating a sitting president? Could you ever imagine that happening in Kingston or St. George's or Rose or Georgetown?
We all know that
not under the present dispensation.
Exactly. Precisely. And when we talk about constitution reform and independence and all of that, my advocacy shall be for the elimination of political parties. We need to get rid of them. Our societies are too small to have political parties. It doesn't work.
Well, it is working, because that is why, for example, when somebody sees a judge does this, if it comes against their political party, they don't care about the right or wrong,
But that's why it doesn't work. That's not the kind of system we want to live in.
But our constitutions do not even recognize the existence of political parties. It doesn't even mention the term political parties. So
but yet the political party is the most powerful organ in the country. So something is wrong.
because it's become the organ of convenience. But trade unions, youth groups, women's organizations, professional organizations, these are the organizations of people that could and should be organizing. Why shouldn't the farmers of our country be able to put forward 3 or 4 candidates independently supported by and campaigned by the farmers? Why couldn't the workers in tourism, the workers in tourism and manufacturing do the same? Why couldn't professionals do the same? I mean, so that is how you get away from the thing. We can condemn the political parties, but we have to do much more than that. We have to actually create alternative institutions.
Yeah, of course. Well,
and we have those institutions.
That is what I mean, Athie. The political party as an organization is not subjected to the state. It doesn't answer to the state.
And that's the frightening part.
Monster.
That's the frightening part.
It reports to nobody.
Yep.
And it becomes the controlling power for the state. That cannot be right. And it cannot be allowed to continue. Absolutely cannot. So we need to have a system that works for us, and there are models. I could just talk about a model. There are models that can work.
Absolutely.
70,000 people in our country is not enough to have 2 and 3 political parties. It's just not enough. It can't work.
The other thing about it, is that these are the same people who take these actions. I want my Prime Minister now, I'm just being very blunt about it, right? Who enter into the Venezuelan fray and speak about principle. And yet you, in your own country, against your own citizens, take this stand. But the world must stand up and applaud you because you say that there's America's trying to conduct a coup in Venezuela.
But they are conducting.
Hold on. What were you trying to do with the teachers here?
Exactly. The political parties have effectively disenfranchised the people of the country.
Yes, that's correct. That's very true.
That's what has happened. So we need to reverse that. We need to reverse that.
Because all of a sudden you have to belong to the political party to get a job, to get a promotion, to get a court ruling in your favor, to get anything.
You said it. That is what happened with the PSC case. In every single one of the instances, the person who was promoted was a known party, either activist, loyalist, or if you didn't want to say they want none of that, at least they were sympathetic. Every single one of the cases.
So that is why I advocate to get rid of political parties and put in place a model that can work for a small nation of 60,000, 70,000, 100,000. We need to have a model, and there are models. It is so simple. You don't even need any major changing of the constitution for it to work.
No, absolutely.
Like in Grenada, the constitution. In Grenada, the constitution talks about a leader of the opposition. But that, to me, and I've said it to lawyers before, why is that interpretation opposition party? It's the opposition in parliament. Who say he has to be a party? The constitution doesn't say party, but the parties take that to interpret it as to mean the leader of the opposition party. I don't know where they get that from. They make it up to suit what they do, but the constitution does not say that. And when it says opposition, as far as I'm concerned, is opposition in parliament. It don't have nothing to do with party.
Right now, though, they're going to claim squatters' rights on that one. They trust me. They've been with it long enough to say this is it.
No, man, the system of governance, the political system, it needs to change, and it has to change if we are to see any improvement in this thing called democracy, if we are to see any true independence. We can't say we're free, we are independent, break the shackles of colonialism. Gosh. And yet still we are held by a structure, a political structure, where the supreme being is the party and everyone has to bow down and worship it.
Right.
Yeah, that is too much enslavement. Sorry. That is worse than colonialism. Excuse me, it's worse than colonialism.
Well, the house slave is always worse than the field hand.
Run out of time. We got another 3 or so minutes, folks.
Yes.
If there's anything else.
I noted that when we discussed Venezuela, we didn't mention something that I hope we will have sometime maybe next week to focus on, which is the collateral issues relating to Venezuela, relating to the growing threat of open military confrontation involving China, Russia, the United States, Turkey, and Iran. There's some really interesting detailed analysis coming out that shows that, in fact, the buildup of military assets in the region, in the Caribbean, and speaks directly to an emerging and a real threat, an imminent threat of confrontation and conflict, which will have...
And you know what happened?
Yeah.
If that happens, Athie, the tourism that so many of our countries depend on,
yes,
as a main source of income, shot.
Well, in immediately understandable terms, all cruise traffic and all travel arrangements for visitors and locals will cease indefinitely. If the conflict that is being predicted and projected occurs, it could occur in the Eastern Caribbean or close to us, or in the Western Caribbean in the vicinity of the Panama Canal, in the vicinity of Nicaragua, and or it will or could occur alongside a land-based conflict involving Brazil and Colombia versus Venezuela, involving directly the land area of Guyana, of Suriname, and so forth. So I mean, and these are not airy-fairy stories.
No,
these
sir,
are serious analyses that are being undertaken now by people who look at these things as a matter of their profession. And I do think we need to focus some attention on that.
And I'm glad you said that, Athie, as we come on to the last minute or so, because all of these leaders who have gone off to the UN, none of them are talking to that issue. No. All their issue is supporting Maduro.
Yeah.
Look how far that Exxon said that Venezuela tried to land on their platform, on the boat.
Yeah.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
They said they actually attempted to land on the platform and take over the boat.
Yeah.
This is where we are.
But all the time,
about that, not a soul.
All the time, the people of Venezuela were calling out for medical supplies and calling out for food and calling out for basic human needs for them to survive. Which Caribbean countries offered 1 grain of fig, 1 pound of yam, 1 bandage, 1 plaster? How did we respond? Are we really talking about responding to the people of Venezuela, or are we playing the same nasty little political games that leaders have played for decades?
Athie, at the last say, I think we better put the wrap on this now before Josh throws. So, folks, we want to thank you once again for joining us for this edition of Mek We Chat. Hope this evening that will give you some thought, something to think about, and maybe brought some new stuff into your equation. On behalf of all of the suspects, I'm George saying so long. Till next Thursday, God willing. Somebody still has to get permission to leave.
Bye, folks.
Whatever.
So good to see you, Auntie.
Yes.
Until
night, guys.
All right.
Nice to see you, Auntie.